But if you're having something like a whey protein shake post-training, that is actually pretty insulinogenic. So that actually causes a pretty decent amount of insulin to come up and help with shuttling energy, nutrients into our cells. Yes?
So it doesn't matter whether if it's just simple sugar from like Gatorade versus complex?
Ideally, post-training, I'm glad you asked this question, you're going to have a more simple type of carbohydrate, an easier, more readily absorbed type of carbohydrate. So that's where you would have something like, I actually have a few examples of different things up here, like these like fig bars I'm a big fan of. They're pretty easy to digest. Again, for me, before a workout I might have them, right after a workout with some protein I might have them. It's just an easy form of calories. But a bar like this, the perfect bar, they're very high in fat. So they make for a nice snack, but this one bar alone has 20 grams of fat, right? Not a super high amount of protein, but better than like, I don't know, a Kit Kat or something. It's got 15 grams of protein, which is not bad. So being mindful of that. But yes, you want to think of the more easy to digest carbohydrates in your peri-workout window. So before, during, and or after is a good time to have those fast absorbing carbs. Outside of that, that could be like your maybe white rice if you feel okay with having that at around your workout time. But outside of that, you want to think of more like whole grain type of thing, higher fiber and all of that. You don't want a whole bunch of vegetables before training because that might not sit very good. But afterwards, after you've had your recovery meal and all those things, you can focus on having that.
All right, I got some questions here that we can, I think, transition into answering.
Just really quick, let me answer Adrian.
Yeah, so going back to like carb loading, carb cycling, I know that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if you eliminate carbs for X amount of time, it transfers into like a ketosis, right? You use fat as energy?
It can, yeah. So you would use like ketones for energy eventually, yeah.
Is that beneficial at all?
It depends. It depends on the person, right? So something like a ketogenic diet, even though I'll make fun of it, it might not be bad to do like if someone suffers from seizures. That was basically where like the keto diet started. The treatment of children with epilepsy, and it works really well in many cases. But if you're going to be doing high intensity training, I wouldn't recommend cutting back on carbs. So it just kind of really depends.
What about for like fat loss?
For fat loss, something like that works great. It works really well because it really helps with getting into a caloric deficit.
Which is the key for most that you want to take on that.
That's where the magic happens, is because you're in a caloric deficit, not necessarily because of the ketones. Because when you go into the ketogenic diet, you got to lower your protein sources to about 15 or 20% in order for your body to start turning that fat into ketones. Does that make sense? So you just can't cut out carbs and think you're going to fall into ketosis. You'd have to fluctuate your other two macronutrients.
All right, so here's a good one. Does alcohol hinder fat loss or performance? Does it hinder macro absorption?
Yeah,
yes.
It can and it does.
Yes.
So being mindful of the fact that alcohol is a literal poison, right? I'll have some people, firefighters are probably the worst at this thing. No disrespect, but all offense intended. No, I'm just kidding. It's like they'll ask about like, I'll say something like having a diet soda is okay. Everyone loses their mind. They're like, what? But aspartame or, whatever else. And then I'll be like, but how much whiskey do you drink? They kind of shut up and laugh. Oh, got it. Point taken, right? So it's like we'll freak out about certain things, but alcohol is a very serious thing to talk about. We've normalized the overconsumption of it, right? I want you guys, on the count of 3, name a bad food. 1, 2, 3. I heard chips, candy, chocolate, Skittles, right? All these things. What makes those foods bad? Sugar. How many people have eaten a banana here before? By a show of hands. Well, you didn't die. So there's that, right? So is sugar really that bad? Maybe not so much, right? On the count of 3, name a really good food. 1, 2, 3.
Gotta define good.
Gotta define good, right? So it all kind of depends, right? But the whole point of me saying that is that there are no good or bad foods. The poison is in the dosage. How many people have taken Advil before, by a show of hands? Right? You take 2 Advils, not a big deal, right? You take the whole bottle, different story, right? It's the same thing when it comes to nutrition. You had pizza that one time, You probably didn't get diabetes from that pizza that one time, right? You had that spinach that one time, you probably didn't become the healthiest person from that one bowl of spinach that you had. We are a result of what we repeatedly do, right? Overconsumption is the problem. That's the issue with alcohol. In a small, like in a micro dose, like if you're having it with one meal, that's going to slow down digestion. It can have an impact on protein, like on muscle protein synthesis, among other things. If you think having that alcohol before bed is helping you sleep better, maybe it's helping you get to sleep, but guess what? Sleep quality is extremely important. And that's going to be terrible just by having a little bit of alcohol at nighttime. So I'm not like trying to poo-poo alcohol, but it is, I'm just being straightforward with it. There's nothing positive from a health standpoint when it comes to alcohol except the social aspect. It helps some people maybe open up and be social, which we know that's important for longevity, but it can affect sleep, it could affect testosterone levels, recovery, and fat loss as well. It could slow down fat loss, and it can affect protein synthesis too.
Nice. So on that,
Yeah.
Do you drink? Do you?
Sometimes, not regularly, but I'm also a good time without the drinks, you know what I mean? But it depends, it really depends. Sometimes I will. Again, I might have rum and Sprite or something like that, right? From time to time. I might have a beer or something from time to time. I'll have some wine or something from time to time, but it's not on a very regular basis. When it's Big Red's birthday, I'm taking a tequila shot, you know? Because my man loves tequila. But most of the time, I'm not drinking. And I've been fine with it. Thankfully, I'm able to, and this is a big part of it, and I don't want to get too much into this, but the social aspect of it, right? Because guess what I can do with what other people say or think about me? I can wipe my butt with it, right? A big part of the problem is caring too much about what other people are going to say. Oh, why aren't you drinking? I've also been blessed to have good family and friends around me that aren't like, oh, why aren't you drinking? And trying to pressure me to do things. If you try to pressure me, that's going to be even more annoying. So the social component, if you're not drinking, something is wrong with you. The hardest place to look sometimes is the mirror, right? We're good at doing this, but not so good at doing this. We point the fingers, not the thumbs, you know? So yeah, I can drink, but I'm also fine not having it. But I am a good time when I drink, I will say that.
So you mentioned that alcohol impacts testosterone. That's another question that we got is, does eating meat increase testosterone in men? Or I guess specifically looking at foods that impact testosterone or other growth hormones, anabolic hormones.
The biggest factor there is, so eating too much, consuming too much over time can increase our body fat stores, right? Now, does automatically increasing body fat equate to being negative for us? Absolutely not, right? So when there's people who are fat shaming, they need to stop. When there's people who are fit shaming, they need to stop, right? Stop pointing at other people's bodies and like judging them and whatnot. But this is where things do happen. There's an increased risk for illness when body fat goes up, right? We know there's an increased risk for type 2 diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol, cancer, depression, all these different sorts of things. Is it guaranteed? No. Increased risk? Yes. But what happens when we eat too little? Things get affected. Probably the same thing, right? There's an increased risk, maybe not for diabetes and those sorts of things, but low energy levels, low testosterone levels, and again, that's why I don't want anyone eating too little, just like I don't want anyone eating too much. Specific foods, I wouldn't really get too much into that, like what the question was saying, like, is meat going to help improve testosterone? It can. It can be a decent source of calories, fat, and other nutrients for sure. But we want to make sure that overall we're not under-consuming nor over-consuming on a very regular basis. Something else that we're going to forget about is getting adequate sleep on a very regular basis. Our body and hormones kind of, in a way, reset themselves when we get proper sleep. And that's going to have an impact on our testosterone too. So, and again, back to what I said before about fats also, getting adequate fat is going to make sure that we're getting an adequate amount of testosterone production as well.
We're not going to get too deep into sleep today, but there is a podcast and a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Look it up, read it. You want to lose weight, sleep more. You want to gain weight, sleep more. You want your performance in BJJ CrossFit, sleep more. We all have a tendency to undersleep. We also have terrible habits leading into sleep, so sleep quality. So you could be in bed for 8 hours, but your sleep quality sucks. So there's a lot of practices there. You could Google this stuff online. Blue blockers, turning off the light, cold dark room, leave the TV out of the room, like these types of practices that you could set yourself up, put your phone away at 7:30 p.m. I know it's hard, but these type of practice will set you up for success, and then also, above all, help with willpower. So your ability to train harder, your ability to regulate what you're eating and how much you're eating and focus. So there's a lot of great things. We're not going to get deep into sleep today, but just look it up, Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep.
Nice. And then the other two questions that we had kind of tie into each other. Paleo diet and intermittent fasting, kind of both for performance and for health purposes. Is it still a thing? Are there benefits? Are there cons of both paleo and intermittent fasting?
I think ultimately they can both be beneficial. For some people, it's practical. Like paleo, you kind of focus on, all right, eliminate or minimize overly processed foods. That's never going to be a bad idea, right? Like if I were to ask you guys, let's say we got 2 plates here, right? And I want you guys to envision this. On this plate, your favorite protein source. It could be a nice lean cut of steak. It could be salmon. It can be chicken breast, whatever. With some quinoa, a nice salad, some strawberries, and a glass of water, right? Let's just say that's 500 calories. Over here, you're going to go ahead and have 9 single stuff Oreos and a glass of milk. Also approximately 500 calories. Which one of these 2 are you going to eat faster? Oreos. For sure. 2 minutes. They're done. What's going to happen after you eat those 9 Oreos? Hell no, you get 6 more. Come on. Then you get the stomach ache, you know? So just right there, you overconsume, right? Over here, that's a very energy-dense meal, right? Lots of calories, not a whole lot of nutrition. That tri-headed monster of sugar, fat, and sodium or salt. People blame sugar alone. Sugar alone is not the issue. It's going to be the sugar, fat, and salt that is the issue. How many people here open up sugar packets and have them by themselves? How many people used to do it when they were kids? For sure, I used to do that easily, right? So we're not overeating just sugar, but it's a part of that 3-headed monster. Over here, we're getting a nutritionally dense meal, right? Plenty of nutrition, plenty of variety. Both are 500 calories. This one, we're getting plenty of nutrition, is going to help us stay feeling full, which is nice about the paleo diet. Again, with paleo, you're focusing on more whole foods, minimizing ultra-processed food, but I'm an advocate for Oreos, so every now and then it's okay to have them. The poison's in the dosage. And intermittent fasting as well. For some people, intermittent fasting works really well because it helps them control that caloric intake window, right? So now they're not over-consuming a bunch of calories for 14 hours in a day, right? They only have 8 hours if they're doing 16 hours fasting and 8 hours of consumption. But guess what? In that 8 hours of consumption, you can still overeat. And then that's going to be a problem, right? I worked with someone who knew someone that was on fasting and they lost weight. So he was like, I want to do it too. Long story short, the guy was just over-consuming in his 8 hours. So he had no weight loss success when it came to that. So it's finding what's going to be best for you. I think there's definitely pros to it, but there's also cons. So some people that swear by fasting, they're going to think that anything else is not going to be beneficial. And they're going to swear by something like cellular health and all these things, when in reality, as a society, we just have a tendency to overconsume a lot of things. It's not just food. We overconsume social media, right? The finger treadmill, all these different things. But intermittent fasting can be beneficial. It can work for some people. Paleo could also work for some people. But whenever you have too many rules around some kind of a diet or a way of eating, we start learning these things and thinking that they're actually bad for us, right? That's why people have such an unhealthy fear of carbohydrates. For years, we heard Atkins and keto and the South Beach diet as just eliminate carbs. Can it help? Sure. They lost 25 pounds, but then they gained 32. Let me go back on the low carb thing because it worked for me. They lose 25, still a net 7, but then they gain another 32. So it's kind of like we don't change our habits is what it is. And ultimately, sustainability is going to be the best diet, whatever you can continue doing for the long run.
Quick question. Is there a thing such as a bad carb? My household, we don't eat rice.
Okay,
We stick to like potatoes and things like that.
I got you.
Is that the right approach? Is rice okay?
I mean, no, rice is definitely fine. I would just kind of ask like why you do that.
I grew up eating rice every day.
I got you.
In Miami, we eat rice.
For sure, yeah. No, but it's the problem is that we might overconsume it, and rice is very easy to overconsume.
Yeah, grandma's fill up the whole plate.
That's the best way, bro. You know, you got to do. And when it's a mix of rice and beans, maybe some picadillo, whatever it is, like, and it's kind of like comfort food too in a way, right? It's like, damn, you know, I remember eating this as a kid when my grandma used to make it and that sort of thing. But But we can still achieve, and I don't know what the ultimate goal is, but if it's for performance, rice can help. It's an easy form of carbohydrate, easy to get those calories in. As far as a hierarchy of needs for athletes, the number one most important thing is calories. Under calories, still important, is going to be macros, right? First, as a dietitian, I want to make sure that my athlete is eating enough. An underfueled athlete is not a very effective athlete. So you got to feed the beast, making sure you're getting enough calories. If rice is going to help with that, then by all means incorporate it. You don't need it, but it can help for sure.
Yeah, like on the performance standpoint with paleo and intermittent fasting, it's not that they're going to necessarily be negative for performance, but they are going to make high athletic performance much more difficult. I mean, back to when we were competing in CrossFit, that was when paleo and CrossFit were super common, and trying to eat paleo, which I did, and consume enough calories to work out for 2, 3, 4 hours a day as a 21-year-old college student wasn't going together that well. And in hindsight, I should not have gone strict paleo when my goals were to be the best CrossFit competitor that I could have. That doesn't mean that it's not possible. It just wasn't it wasn't possible for me to get enough calories eating paleo to sustain that high level of athletic CrossFit, whatever, performance, right? Same thing with intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is going to be very difficult to restrict your feeding times and maintain a high level of performance. Now, if you guys are doing BJJ and doing a workout, it's going to be very tough for you to do both of that in a day or a majority of days and then consume enough calories while fasting or while on a food-restricted diet. Now, what do I do on a daily basis? And don't base anything off of me. Almost every single day, I'm primarily paleo and intermittent fasting right now, right? So, but again, what is my workout situation? I work out once in the morning, moderately hard for an hour. I make it work for me, but if my goals transform to, hey, I'm training for a CrossFit competition or I'm training for a bike race, that's not going to be what works for me on the performance standpoint there. I think I just had a question come in that comes off of that. When it comes to fasting, is there a better time for fasting than others? For example, on rest days, and how many hours before consuming foods? And when you finally get to eat, what are the best type of nutrients to immediately consume?
That's a good question. Ultimately, we still want to try to get to the fundamentals that I had laid out before. Getting adequate protein, again, the hierarchy of needs, still getting enough calories. So how you do that, it kind of doesn't really matter. From a timing standpoint, like when is a better time to fast or break the fast, it also depends on the person. Like if someone is doing shift work, I might have them kind of turn their whole feeding schedule around. Instead of fasting from the night into the morning, maybe they'll fast from the morning into the night. So it really depends on what's going to be the most practical and sustainable thing for this individual to do. I wouldn't really get caught up in the little nuances of like what do studies show. Well, one, we still need more science on that. But two, what's going to be practical? And it might not be the sexiest answer, but we got to think back to what am I going to be able to keep on doing on a very regular basis? Can you fast and thrive? For sure. You absolutely can, as long as you're getting enough calories, but not too much, as long as you're still hitting your macronutrient needs. So the timing part of it almost doesn't matter. But keep this in mind too. When are you training? What does your training look like? What are your goals? There's so many things to kind of think about when we're considering, should I do this or should I do that? Fasting before a very intense workout, I wouldn't recommend it. Fasting, if you're fasting before like a 2-mile